We're on the heels of a previous generation living in tune with patriarchal gender norms. When you grow up with this being normalized, it's hard to unlearn. I've had quite a few men asking me, are you just like hating on your husband? Is that why you're doing this series? That's not the case. I have a very loving husband teaching the boys menstruation because I grew up with two older sisters. At some points, I bet there were 4 women in the home who were on their cycle. We couldn't talk to my dad about it. Majority of women working 9-to-5 job, and they're coming home and they're laboring through the entire evening. When do they get a break?
The husband will proudly say, I've never changed a diaper. I've never entered the kitchen. How did you get your husband on board?
I think that
What triggered you? Was there an instance?
there was,
Why do you think today in society that patriarchy is still alive in a way?
because
What is that one piece of advice you would give to all the parents?
let your kids.
Hey parents, welcome to another episode of the Modern Indian Parent Podcast. I'm Sanchita Daswani, a pediatric nutritionist, and every week we bring you episodes where we are redefining parenting in Indian families. And talking about redefining, our guest today on the podcast is Payal Desai, also known as Payal for Style on Instagram and TikTok. Her viral Dusty Sun series on social media seeks to dispel traditional gender norms, starting right from her home with her sons. Her series has caught the attention of media outlets, has had over millions of views, and today she is here on the podcast to share with us the importance of this topic and how we can start implementing it at home and the struggles and challenges that we face today as parents when it comes to traditional gender roles. So let's welcome her to the podcast. Welcome, Payal, to the Modern Indian Parent Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me.
I mentioned in the intro about how your messaging, your posts have really gone viral for the right reasons. And today we are here to talk all about challenging traditional gender roles, which is something you truly believe in. And let's just get right into it. I want to ask you first about this term, no dusty sons. Can you elaborate to us? What does that mean?
What does a dusty sun mean? I think it is a son, and I would say, let's talk about the term dusty and take the gender out of it for a moment. So dusty means not showing up for your responsibilities, not being accountable, using weaponized incompetence, and just not being overall like a kind, thoughtful, compassionate, empathetic person. And we live largely in a patriarchal society. And this spans across cultures. And so we'll get into my inspiration, my reason for this whole series. But truly, that's what it's talking about. A dusty sun has been across cultures. The way that we've raised boys, I don't believe has benefited our society. And so when I became a mother of sons, I chose to look at it differently and approach it in a very different way, because what I think traditionally was happening was not, honestly, it wasn't working for me as a young girl, as a teen, as a woman in society, as a mother. And so I was like, hey, this is my opportunity to, from the ground up, from my home, some say so. Now, of course, I shared that on social media, and the response to that was really incredible. So I realize it's not just a me thing. This speaks to women, this speaks to parents, this speaks to people across the board.
Right. And when we think of this term, and when you just started posting, was there a specific moment or an instant where you said, I need to get this across? Because I know generally you said that you don't agree with, the way a lot of men are being brought up and the ideas, but what triggered you? Was there an instance?
There was. So this trend was existing on social media, but the way that it was being portrayed was mothers who were saying, I'm teaching my son to cook so that your dusty daughters, it's called Stouffer's lasagna. It's like a frozen lasagna. Frozen lasagna doesn't impress him. And I thought to myself, I saw this and I said, all this does is perpetuate a toxic cycle. We don't know if that wife is coming home after working a 9 to 5, because in our society, we have majority of women who are now working. And so we're not considering that and not even if they are stay at home or what have you, we're placing the burden of cooking and taking care of the family once again on the woman in the household. And so we're teaching our sons, and this was the trend that I saw. I'm teaching my son to cook so that your daughter's whatever doesn't impress him. Why are we doing this to women? This is a time for us to unlearn what hasn't worked, break generational cycles. So I sent this reel to my sister, who also is a mom of a son. And I was like, because it's the music and the stare, it's like that iconic thing. And I sent it to her and I said, I want to do this trend, but I cannot get on board with the messaging and we need to shift it. So she said, well, why don't you teach your son how to take care of himself and clean up after himself so that your daughter won't have to spend her entire life catering to your son. And that was the first reel. That was the wording of the first reel. And it went mega viral, like on Instagram, on TikTok. It really had such reach. And this is when I realized that this really spans across cultures, across like borders. I mean, this spoke to so many women, not just moms. I thought initially that it was just going to be moms of sons who this might resonate with. No, it was really any person who has ever taken an issue with traditional gender roles, and many of us have. And so just to point that out. So that was the inspiration point. Now, when a reel went viral, literally the next day, I thought to myself, well, there's a lot that I'm teaching my sons that go against traditional gender norms and roles. The way that our household operates is that we're very equal partners. We are both seen in our home cooking and cleaning and taking on the mental load and looking after the kids and doing all of the things collaboratively, my husband and I. And so I thought, well, there's a lot that we do in our home that I think that we could share, and how we got here and how we're doing it. And so whether it was taking on like mental health and ensuring that our boys have emotional IQ, meditating, doing yoga, working through feelings, right? Like not allowing anger to build up so that, or sadness, I would say, to build up so that it becomes anger. Working through, talk about it. Let's have an open dialogue. So all these things that we were doing, whether it was the domestic labor or that emotional mental labor, we started posting videos daily of what we were doing. And that's really how the series came to be.
Right. Yeah. And it's so interesting because actually the reality of the situation is, see, we are all trying to be modern Indian parents. Like now, all of us, because I think we have more access to knowledge, we are more aware, we want to make change, and we're able to do that. We want to do things differently. But for some reason, there is that sense of subtle patriarchy in a lot of families still. And, I still hear a lot of comments with people around me where they will say, the husband will proudly say, I've never changed a diaper. I've never entered the kitchen. And there is that sense of that. So even though so many of us are trying to be that modern Indian parent where we're doing baby-led weaning, we're doing gentle parenting, we're trying all of that. Why do you think today in society there are still a lot of those people that patriarchy is still alive in a way?
Well, because I guess because it is very much still alive. When we look at from the top, I mean, who's in power? Men are still largely in power. Men are still the owners of resources and property and privilege and overall power. And so when isn't changing, then it makes it very difficult for us as women to position ourselves and to speak loudly to anyone who is still so deeply rooted in the patriarchy. When we think about our partners, well, when we think about any of our upbringing, we're on the heels of a previous generation who was very much living in tune with patriarchal gender norms. We are just one step off from them. So we're doing the hard work. And I don't always blame our partners or any of us for holding true to those values. Because when you grow up with this being normalized, it's hard to unlearn it. It's hard to, and then it's hard to also say that I'm going to do the work and have the tough conversations to face this. But I do believe, and I've been told through my content, that it has allowed for these conversations. And I love that. I have a lot of women who tell me, I send all your reels to my husband. And then sometimes it's just the initial spark of a conversation. And then their husband will say, I didn't know you felt that way, or I didn't look at it that way. I didn't see it that way. So perhaps it's just shifting perspective. It happens like inch by inch. But that's why the content in the series has been so controversial. It doesn't land with everybody. And I've had quite a few men who have come to me either in an abrasive way. Of course, you have those like hate comments, but then also in a way of just asking me, well, is this like, are you just like hating on your husband? Do you just have so much hatred towards your husband? Is that why you're doing the series? And I'm like, no, if you truly watch it, you'll see that he's a large part of what we're doing. I think you have to follow and like see how much he's in my page and on my page to observe that. But if you just see a few of the content pieces where it's just me and the boys, you may think that I'm just like angry at men. Well, that's not the case. I have a very loving husband and I'm not angry at men. I have two boys and I love them and I want them to be generous and kind and compassionate men. And I'm doing everything in my power to ensure that they are loved and well supported. They don't hate men. So that's kind of it's a very naive viewpoint. And I think it's the easy way to make peace with my content. If you don't like it, if it offends you, the easy thing to say is that she just must hate men. Why not look inwards? Why not look inwards and start to understand what it is like to live on this earth in the shoes of a woman? And this is a conversation that I continuously have with my husband. That I don't think you, and I don't expect you to know what it's like to be in my shoes. But when I tell you, listen. When I tell you, listen with empathy and understand that my worldview is very different than probably yours. But let's come together and create a better one for our boys.
Yeah. And, speaking of that, do you think that also it's important for the woman to also look at the guy side in it as well? Because I know you're a boy mom in that sense. So, well, we've done certain podcasts in the past where we've done one, for example, on finances. And actually the statistics was that 90% of the views were from men. So it was also showing that it's also tough for sometimes women, a lot of women to take the place of, putting that input in the house and all of that in terms of finances. So do you feel the same should happen in the reverse as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that men in society, and specifically in our South Asian culture, there's a lot of pressure. There is so much pressure put on them from such a young age to be told that by your parents, you're going to take care of us. That burden from such a young age, like, wow, to shoulder that. Then to grow up saying you are going to be the provider of your home. You have to be successful. You will have a family to take care of. And as we fight for equality, well, then also we should recognize that women are providers. So that's not going to just be shouldered by men. And so there's another conversation I have with my husband quite a bit that, when's the last time you cried? When's the last time you shed tears? And if it was a very, very long time ago, like you can't think years and years ago, that's not healthy. That means every emotion that you have felt has been bottled up inside. I cannot imagine how that feels. And so I think that from what you're asking is to also empathize with men. And if we want to come to a common ground, then we really have to understand that there has been challenges for both. Yeah. And so when we're trying to move forward and move forward differently, it's not just empowering women, it's also empowering our boys. It has to be. And giving them space to feel, to heal, all of it. And I think that that is a really large piece of it. And so when these women who tell me I'm sending the reels to my husband, I hope that they're also understanding why their husband behaves the way that he does. Because that's the only way that you're going to get through to a really healthy conversation.
Both sides need to have that empathy and understand that even the husbands, it's because maybe they were brought up a certain way. Like I see sometimes so many husbands are stuck in the middle. They want to do something for the wife, but then the parents are there and they are battling themselves. So I like that you're saying that, because then it helps us feel that it is both ways and it's about having compassion for both sides. And it's so interesting because you're saying that that's the way we've also been brought up. Because I remember when I got married in the beginning, first I used to think, like when we're having dinner, the first roti that comes out, like it just was something I was like, oh no, I guess he should take it first, because it's just something the way we've been brought up. And oh, he has to take it first, or he needs to sit a certain place. And honestly, he doesn't really care. And then now I'm like, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat first. But that instinct is still a little bit inside of us. And I think it's about just first acknowledging that and then working towards it.
Yeah, I mean, the patriarchy lives very much within all of us. And it's recognizing how it's showing up and for you. And once again, like how you are pulling it on your own. So that's like your own self-healing too. There's a lot of beliefs that I know I have within me. And every once in a while, I'll face it and say to myself, oh my God, I'm recognizing and having that light bulb moment. Like, why am I thinking that way? Oh, that's because I've been conditioned to think that way. My husband actually doesn't have that expectation of me. So now that's my own work to do.
Yeah, because I'm a twin mom and I have a boy and a girl. So like as they were growing, I'll have like girl toys and I'll have girl clothes. And sometimes my son will be like, I want to wear those pajamas, which are my daughter's, or he'll be playing with the dolls. And in the beginning, again, that instinct thing was, why does he want to play with the dolls? That's my first thing. Then I would snap out of it. But then I also realized, and I think this is what gentle parenting does, is that, and you can also add on to this, it's first important before we raise our kids a certain way that we also heal ourselves and also we are clear about how we want to do things.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I've shown on my page, my younger son enjoys doing skincare with me and painting his nails. And he asked for a dollhouse for Christmas. And we obliged him and like allowed him to lead the way. First, I will say I was like, okay, not sure how to receive this or what we should do with it. Do we say no? But his enthusiasm and his joy was not to be taken by us. So we were like, okay, like, you tell us what you want to do. And I think sometimes he's very connected with me. So he watches me do these things and he's like, Mama's doing it. I want to do it too. Not just learn not to question it so much. Like, why are we questioning he doesn't understand gender and identity. He's 4. So he's just enjoying what he enjoys for whatever reason. And it makes me sad that at a certain point in probably upcoming years, there will be something that is said to him that maybe shifts his view. And now all of a sudden he'll say, I don't want to paint my nails. I don't want to do skincare. I hope that doesn't happen. I just hope that he continues to authentically be who he wants to be. That's my only goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that it's the expectations we have, and also one thing that I think I've also had to learn over the years is to just be ourselves and own it. And I think that's what we want our kids to do. And, I'll give you an example. I'd gone to my kids' school and there was a boy and it was Halloween. So they were all dressed up. And one of the boys was wearing an Elsa costume. Okay. And this boy is 4 years old. So later I asked my daughter, I said, oh, did you see he was wearing an Elsa costume? And she's like, yeah, he loves Elsa. He loves dresses. Like her response was so innocent and not thinking of anything, saying that he likes it. He's wearing it. That's it. But I realize it's us who have these pre-notions in our head that does this mean something? What does it imply? What do we do? And as you said, sometimes it's important to not question so much. And if we look at it from our kids' view, if they have that innocent factor, but something comes in the way as they're growing up that breaks that, don't you feel?
Yeah. And I do think that if we were to say, no, you cannot paint your nails. No, you cannot do your skincare. No, you cannot have a dollhouse. Confusing that would actually be to a young child. They would question why. That doesn't make any sense. And it's so harmful to at that point say a blanket no, and there's no real understanding behind like why that would be said to like you're implying gender at such a young age. And I've had a lot of people ask me, well, are you afraid that you're confusing him? Do you think that any of what you're doing in the long run will confuse him? Well, he's going to be who he is, regardless. All I'm doing is supporting that. And in fact, the way that I look at it is that he will always stay true to himself because he'll always feel supported to stay true to himself. He will have a sense of confidence in who he is. Whether that is leaning one way or the other, when it comes to gender, whatever his interests end up being, but he will feel loved and supported. I've done my job. That's that.
Yes. Yeah, that's the most important thing. And speaking about being a boy mom, you've covered so many important topics on your reels about them accepting their feelings and crying. And I love that you've done some about talking to them about periods and what women go through as well. So, from all the topics you've covered, what do you feel is the most important or has gotten the most traction or most kind of conflict? Is there one particular, one that you feel people are struggling with or you feel you want to place more emphasis on?
Yeah, I think it comes down to two. It is definitely what you have just stated about teaching the boys menstruation, because we as women, specifically, I'll speak to South Asian women, we grew up with a lot of taboo around our menstrual cycles, our periods. I grew up with two older sisters, and it was even though at some points I bet there were 4 women in the home who were on their cycle, we couldn't talk to my dad about it. It was very embarrassing. It was just, you don't cross that line. Religiously, if we go to the temple, we can't pray. And so we were always in every which way communicated that this is dirty. It's just, don't talk about it. Don't make a big deal out of it. If you're in pain, be in pain quietly. So that does quite a bit of harm. Now, when I talk to the boys who are 4 and 9 about periods, I think that it makes a lot of women uneasy. And so they come to me and they'll say, well, what do you say? How do you talk? At what age is it appropriate? And I had a woman recently say to me, I can't even really talk to my husband about it. How am I supposed to talk to my son? So this is still an area where there's a lot of work to be done. And even though I do talk openly with my sons about it, and monthly when I'm on my period, I'll say, hey, I'm on my period. I'm not feeling too well. And they'll know, and all is well. We were at a friend's house just about a week ago, and I was talking to the other mom about being on my period in front of my son, my older son. And he goes, Mom, why are you talking about that? I said, because it's normal. We talk about it. He goes, it feels embarrassing. And so then later I said to him, well, why did that feel embarrassing? Like, what about it? And so regardless of what I'm telling him in the home, like there's still this sense of, discomfort. And so it can kind of tackle it head on. So I think that that's an area where like even providing like scripts and really like breaking it down to that level of like, what do I say? How do I say it? That will make it comfortable for me and understandable for my son. And so, yeah, that's definitely an area that I like to place emphasis and attention on. The other one that every single time I post anything about the domestic labor in the home, and empowering our sons to notice the domestic labor that needs to be done in the home, it always hits. And I'm just like, wow, this to me shows that there's so many homes where the woman is taking on the burden of that labor, be it the cooking, the cleaning, the looking forward to like, okay, there's whatever it might be, the laundry, the dishes, all of those tasks are largely being done by women in households. And It's shocking to me in ways because truly majority of women I know in my circles are working 9 to 5 jobs, many times outside of the home, and they're coming home and they're laboring through the entire evening. When do they get a break? And it just reminds me of what I grew up with, what I saw growing up, that I said to myself, I can't do that. I don't have the mental, emotional, physical capacity to take on the entire load of my job and the home.
And I think for women, like once we have kids and we're working, it's like our mental load is a lot because not only are we working and taking care of the home, but in our mind, we're thinking of 100 things. The play dates, the classes, do they need new socks? A lot of that also, like the responsibilities of our kids day to day is on us. So I know even when I'm working, I'm thinking like now I just remembered I forgot to put my note in my kid's lunchbox. I have to go do that after. We always have that mental load as women. Last week we had a podcast episode where she's the founder of a food product brand, and she was also saying, she's like, women just sometimes don't know how to ask for help. And she was saying that men, they ask for everything. They want their food, they want their laundry, they want this, and they'll happily ask. But we will think twice before we ask for help. So she's like, just ask, just be open. Because also men, sometimes they don't realize. Like you have to be very clear with them, you know? How did you get your husband on board in that sense? Like, was it easy? Were you guys both on board in the beginning? Did you have the same ideology from the start?
Yeah, I think that we did have the same ideology from the start. And in that he grew up with one older brother, and I'm not sure what play, like I've actually talked openly with my mother-in-law to ask, what did you do differently? Because he truly is somebody who shows up for the mental load. Like he'll walk past laundry and say, that needs to go in, let me put it in. Even sometimes I'll admit more so than me. And so I know that I'm fortunate for that. And I know that that's exactly what the boys, my sons, are seeing. So sometimes I rest a little easy in the fact that they have this role model in a father who shows up for every aspect of their upbringing. And so I feel some sense of like calm and assurance because of that. But I have asked his mom, and this is what also validates for me, it's all within your upbringing. What he saw in his home was also a sharing of the mental and the physical load. My in-laws owned a business, and that took up many hours and early mornings. And my husband was tasked with like, you need to wake up and like, you need to get your breakfast. You need to pack your lunch. When you come home, you have these responsibilities. Every Saturday, we stop everything. We're cleaning the home top to bottom. Everybody has a zone, a role. You do this, you do this. So she tasked them. Somebody recently asked me, do you feel that that was the case because they did not have a sister? Had they had a sister in the home, would that dynamic have shifted? Well, no one knows. I have no clue if that would have shifted or not, but I do know that he was empowered from a young age to really take responsibility, and that has had an impact on him overall. So it's just, again, it validates for me that this does start right in your home from a young age, and if you're doing that, then, you're going to hopefully see a man who grows up to own his responsibilities.
Yeah, I mean, they say that our kids learn from our actions more than what we say, right? So it's more about what we're doing. So, but, in especially a lot of our viewers, they are living in Asia, and a lot of us have help. So now a lot of us have delegated the cooking and the laundry and a lot of these chores to the help. So how can we then, as parents, kind of show that we're sharing it when we're also kind of delegating some of that? Then I think also sometimes I realize that a lot of our kids are getting a little bit lazy and a little spoiled because we in turn as moms are like, oh, we have someone to help us and delegate. But then because we're not doing it, it's also kind of showing them that, oh, you don't have to make your bed every day because someone is going to do it anyways. So that is something that I have been tackling. Because also I'm like, I'm tired. I'm like, okay, for someone else to help. But then at the same time, I'm trying to find that balance where how can I show my kids that they need to do this as well? Because I remember like living in Curacao, like Sundays, we didn't have help. So we had to clean the toilets. We had to cook. we had to do all of that. So what advice would you give for all of us in Asia who have that help to still kind of imbibe these values in our kids?
Yeah, I would say take any opportunity, like you just talked about Sundays. So if there is an off day, or if there are things that you could task your kids with, okay, they're going to do the laundry, but we want you to put it away. We want you to organize it. It just takes a little bit of balance, because we have some of that too. We have a little bit of hired help who helps with our laundry when it gets overwhelming. And I had the same exact thought because we had outsourced our laundry. It was getting to be too much. And I was like, this is something I want to take off of my plate, which I think is an important thing for our kids to see as well. That when things become overwhelming, it is okay to delegate it and take it off of your plate, to not overwhelm, because what are we talking about then? We're salvaging our mental health and our sanity. That's a healthy practice. But I did have this exact conversation with my husband where I said, I'm worried that they are now losing an entire skill of being able to do their laundry, fold it, and put it away. And so now we kind of switch every other week where we'll get the help, and then on the off week, we'll have them do it. So it's striking a balance, I think, and still finding opportunities to have your kids do the work, because I think it is very important.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a little bit more about your reels, because I know that a lot of them have gone viral, and you said you've been getting a lot of also negative comments. So I know you mentioned a few, but has there been that one comment or that one thing where you're like questioning, or actually was like, I want to know about some of those?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few, and they just tend to be from people who are not ready for the conversation. And I think that the patriarchy works in favor quite a bit of a lot of people, a lot of men. They're comfortable. They're happy with women in the kitchen, women doing all the work, women taking care of everything, right? So these are the people who then see the content and they're like, why are you putting these toxic ideas out into the world? Why are you inspiring or encouraging or brainwashing women to raise our sons differently? And I think that also leads to challenging traditional definitions of masculinity, which truly I grapple with this all the time. Like, what aspect of masculinity do we as a society want to hold on to? What aspect, like when we define gender, masculinity versus femininity, what do these things actually mean? And are they always tied to, are they always gender specific, or are they just qualities? And why not just shift gears altogether and just say, I want to raise a good human? And I don't really care what if that means masculine or feminine. I want to raise a good human all around. So whenever I take on anything regarding like challenging masculinity, I think that does not sit well with quite a few people. And then they speak to why I'm bringing forth these ideas, and like, it's not my place, and say, just, stay in the kitchen stuff. And it's quite terrible.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're talking about the gender roles and how we're trying to redefine that, so an interesting conversation I had with my husband was that, for example, I also realized that when you're in a partnership, it's also about realizing everyone's strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, like I am very good at, or I'm organized. So I'm very good at planning the play dates and the dinners and all of that. And I remember once telling my husband, I was like, but like, why can't you just do it once? Like, I'm tired. And he's like, but look, that's what's easy to you. It's good. Like, you enjoy doing it and all of that. I can help you, but generally it's also about, that's your strength and I'll focus on my strengths. And that's what also makes us work as a partnership. So do you feel that, like, even because in household chores, I mean, some people are better at cooking, some are good at folding the laundry. So do you think that is a good way for maybe couples to start and kind of see, like, how can we divide the tasks?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it's so important to play off of your strengths in any relationship, right? And so when you are living with somebody and sharing space and sharing all the responsibilities, you should play off of your strengths. I just think that if one person is taking on a larger burden, and it's all their strengths being utilized and less of the other, then that's when that conversation needs to come into play. Hey, I do have a lot of strengths here. That doesn't mean that I should be taken advantage of. And so now we need to talk about what you can also do so that I can feed off of my strengths, but then like let's also sharpen your strengths. Just because you're not coming with them, like we can work on that so that it does feel a little bit more equal. Otherwise, your strengths are going to lead you to burnout, and nobody benefits from that in the home.
Yeah. I think what I'm really picking up from this whole conversation is really about having open communication and being open about what you feel good about, what you don't, what you're, just having that conversation. And it's not that you always have to agree, but be willing as parents to work on it, and for our kids to really let them be them, be themselves, be confident, be proud of who they are. And that way they'll be able to get out in the world and not be affected by these gender roles and these things that people are telling them. And the last question I wanted to ask you is, you have this aspect of humor a little bit in your views. I mean, these topics are serious, but how much do you feel the role of humor has helped kind of spread and maybe make it a little fun and light so it's not so serious when you are sending it to your husband? How do you feel that's helped?
So I think that's really helpful because you were just talking about open communication. And a lot of times we get to the point of wanting to communicate something when we've buried it inside and it's creating anger within us. So that open communication oftentimes can come out as an attack. And we have to be very aware of any time we're in conversation and communication, when there's a conflict that we want to talk about, we need to ensure that we're understanding how it's being received. Then that is just being a compassionate person. And again, recognizing like where did my husband come from? Like, what's his upbringing? What thoughts and what has he grown up with that he has to unlearn? So let me have this conversation so that we're both being heard. And so the humor aspect of it, I feel, opens that up in a subtle way so that it's not an angry attack.
Because my husband always says, he's like, if you scream at me, I'm not going to listen. But if you say anything lovingly, I am happy to listen. I'm happy to do it. So you're right. I think that humor just makes it not so, they'll be open for that conversation if you kind of send it in that way.
Yeah, because what happens to the point of when, you want to have the conversation is there's so much frustration that has built up within you. It's not going to come out in a way that doesn't sound like an attack. So the humor allows for, it's sort of like a segue into that conversation.
And to wrap it up, if, for all the viewers watching, if they really want to challenge the traditional gender roles, what is that one piece of advice you would give to all the parents out there to just get started and to make that change?
Honestly, let your kids lead. Let them inform you of who they are, and then you support them. That's that. And you kind of just give them a little bit more of that ownership of who they want to be, and try to stay on the sidelines of it and just love and support them through the process.
Amazing. That makes so much sense. And I think every day we're working on that as parents. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so enlightening, and it gives me a very positive outlook that there is hope and there are people like you who are spreading the word and making us have these conversations. So thank you for doing what you do and for being here today on the podcast. It was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.